Hello there. Now there's more important things out there than today's Tory budget, and here's two of them. While Jeremy Hunt was the centre of attention, making beer a bit cheaper in the pubs, freezing fuel duty, and setting up the rich to pour larger amounts of dosh into their already huge pension pots, there were two other issues that seemed to be getting the nothing much to see here treatment. The first of these is the stubbornly high level of people leaving us early. The excess of them leaving us early. The latest ONS figures show that the rate at which this happened since March 2020 ran at 10% above the national 5-year rolling average. That's over 177,000 people. But for 2022, 90% of that excess happened in the second half of the year. And in the 9th week of this year, the week ending the 3rd of March, the latest period we have the numbers for, it was 7.6% above the 5-year average for that week alone. And further, it was an increase on the previous week too. Surely numbers like these would spark a proper parliamentary debate with questions being asked of the Health Secretary. But I haven't seen much of that, and nothing about it in PMQs today either. No, they were more interested in what is now being called Lineker-gate and the usual political point scoring. And the second thing that should be a lot more prominent in people's minds and in the media is this emerging banking saga. And don't think for a moment that governments and central banks will sort it out. Fractional reserve banking is always a failure waiting to happen. Now, 3 of the smaller US banks, Silvergate Bank, Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, have already failed within days of each other. And the larger ones are now beginning to catch the contagion as their share prices slide. And as an aside, senior managers in Silicon Valley Bank offloaded the shares they personally owned in the bank before it went down the tubes and was sold for a quid to HSBC. Anyway, this wider banking contagion is not limited to the United States. With European banks like Societe Generale, BNP Paribas and Deutsche Bank sliding 15 to 20% over the last few days, while in London the likes of Barclays, Standard Chartered and Lloyds all saw similar slides, and some banks have had to stop trading their shares as a result. And this has weighed on stock markets across the world, wiping more than 50 billion quid off of the FTSE 100 alone. So while Jeremy Hunt glows with pride at the IMF saying that the UK will avoid a technical recession this year, the banking system might have other ideas. But for everyone across the globe, not just the US, not just the UK, and not just Europe. And not only that, people are more concerned at the moment about their own personal recession as their wages are squeezed and their buying power is hammered by inflation. But just about all of us get paid via our banks, and some have savings in them, and your pension fund is likely to hold banking shares. So your bank coming under pressure should interest you. Now, one bank that is taking a real hammering right now is the Zurich-based Credit Suisse. The share price of Switzerland's second largest bank, if it still is, that share price is tanking fast. And in the knowledge that banks are just about joined at the hip, as shown by the 2008 credit crunch, you can imagine that politicians and central bankers around the world are going to be nervous, but also trying to play it all down to prevent a run on the banks. That would ruin their entire lives. Now, a lot of tinkering took place in the decade or more since the last banking crisis to make sure it could never happen again. And the US and UK have so far taken immediate action to head off a crisis. And you have to wonder if Hunt's pension fund changes today are more about getting more money into the banking system than discouraging the well-off from retiring. But none of this has so far stopped a slow contagion as banking stocks continue to slide, with regulators firefighting each impending failure as it arises and the Fed once again stepping in with cheap liquidity. So we should listen when Larry Fink, the head of the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, when he warns of the possibility of a slow-motion, rolling financial crisis to come. But with the influence that supranational organisations like the WEF now have, one wonders if we will all wake up one day, owning nothing and being told we must be happy. But that would take a highly coordinated slow-motion banking crash, which of course this isn't. Richard.
Angry? Yes, I am. I just watched the PMQs and the budget, and with one or two exceptions, I have to say I have nothing but complete disdain for those vermin that sit on the seats in Westminster. The public school childish exchanges are nothing new, but sometimes, like many of you, I just find those exchanges intolerable. This was a very serious day. Once again, I watched a multimillionaire chancellor that nobody wants, who was given his position in government by a billionaire prime minister that no one elected. You see, they govern without consent and govern by fear. And fear has been the hallmark of this government and most other governments around the world. But I don't live in another country or some other part of the world, and I look on at this unelected Prime Minister and his WEF Chancellor with seething rage. Small business owners bore the brunt of the economic devastation 3 years ago when they were asked to shut up shop, many without any support from any furlough payments. Yet they will now be forced to shoulder the tax burden for the state via the corporation tax hike from 19% to 25%. For many SMEs, this will be the final nail in the coffin, and the tax increase will be passed on to consumers, and thus the token giveaways to encourage people to basically not retire will be meaningless and only help those with pension pots large enough to fund the heating of the Prime Minister's lily pad. I mean swimming pool. Oh, and Jeremy Hunt mentioned aid for municipal swimming pools. I think that came directly from Sunak's guilt over him upgrading the national grid to heat his own swimming pool. Did you notice that the Prime Minister didn't answer or reply to the question about his swimming pool at PMQs? Yeah, I hope his wife takes a dump in it. Don't get me wrong, anything to help the wet trade in pubs is good. But a couple of extra pints and childcare assistance isn't going to get people back to work if the businesses they could have worked for have gone bust or laying off staff because of the corporation tax rise. This budget is yet another triumph for the globalist agenda, where small businesses are removed and multinationals are ushered in to fill in the gaps. All to save the economy and state structures, of course. As for maintaining the state, well, here's a point I have long pondered over, and that is, why does targeted money printing have to lead to Weimar Republic, Zimbabwean-style hyperinflation? I'm talking about targeted money here. Targeted money printing towards sectors that are in loss could be used to offset loss. The quantitative easing that wasn't really money printing, but an asset swap scheme, that managed to ensure banks remain solvent, as if the banks have to remain solvent. No, they don't. Banks should only serve their primary function as the place where you store your cash, and should not be involved in money lending either. That just inflates prices yet again. This is how we have become slaves to the fiat money via fractional reserve banking. So let the banks collapse and take held deposits in collapsing banks and transfer them to safe banks. That's what they should have done all along. And target money printing towards areas of failing infrastructure, currently walking towards negative possessions of investment. But neither the Tories nor Labour will go against their masters in Davos, and we'll stick to plan whilst you and I grow poorer. I mean, the elephant in the room is doing a lap dance in this budget, and in other previous budgets of the past 3 years. Have we all forgotten the cost of track and trace? Yeah, you remember track and trace? Do you know how much that cost? Tens of billions. And the government's response to the global health emergency, this destroyed the nation's economy. But instead of addressing that obvious fact, the government and media have embarked upon a policy of industrial level gaslighting. Well, that's His Majesty's government for you. Not my government and not my king. The vice-like grip over the people's lives continues to tighten, and the masses continue to comply. The state continues to grow. The masses continue to comply. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And wealth is transferred to the elite whilst the people freeze. Just don't forget Rishi Sunak's swimming pool and the upgraded electricity network to heat it, because it perfectly symbolises the world we live in today. Oh, and the FTSE is falling, just showing how much confidence the markets have in the Chancellor's budget. But I don't care about the markets. I only care about the immediate situation of ordinary people. And the only FTSE I am interested in is the FTSE played between myself and my good lady when we go out for a meal on date night. Anyway, what do you think about the rubbish I have just spouted? Let us know in the comment section below, and we will see you again at 5:45 tomorrow for your daily dose of Jeff and I.